Use this splice on double braids where the strength is generated by the core only. The tools you will need to perform this splice are a tape measure, knife, scissors, twine, fids, pusher, tape, needles, palm, pliers, and markers. Pin off 15 feet from the bitter end of the line. Use a small fid to pin the cover and the core together. Making sure you do not have a heat-sealed end, pull the core from the bitter end of the rope. The core of this rope is made from colored yarns to make following the procedure easier. These cores will generally be one color. Both are shown. Expose 14 times the rope's diameter in inches of core. This is to create sleeve slack. Hold the sleeve at the point where the core is exposed and move, or milk, all the slack toward the pin you inserted in step number 1. Leave no slack behind. Use a needle to pin the induced slack away from the end to be spliced. Make the first mark on the sleeve, 33 rope diameters from the bitter end of the core. The next mark on the rope will describe the size of your eye when it's doubled over. Using a needle and twine, seize the portion of the rope between the two eye marks. Sew through the entire line, both the sleeve and the core, at the point 3 picks inward of both eye marks that you made in the prior step. Tie off the twine in a square knot. Cut off the excess twine, leaving short ends. Beginning with the second eye mark, use a small fid to separate the picks of the sleeve, and directly on the mark, expose the core. Once the core is exposed, pull out a loop of the core material. This will pucker the sleeve material between the eye and the small fid. At the first eye mark, only on the opposite side of the rope, use a small fid to split the picks of the sleeve and expose the core. Pull out the entire core. This will leave 2 tails, one of core and one of sleeve. Using an oversized fid, bury 12 rope diameters of the sleeve tail into the core tail. Enter the core as close to mark 1 as possible. Measure 6 rope diameters from the first eye mark towards the bitter end and mark through the core onto the sleeve inside. Bunch the core up toward the first mark to expose your new mark. Cut the sleeve tail straight across at this mark. Comb out and taper the sleeve. Milk the core away from the first eye mark, burying the tapered sleeve. Pull out the sleeve at the second eye mark, bunching the sleeve and exposing as much core as possible. Pin to hold this loop out. Form the eye by matching the stitch on the first eye mark to the exit point of the second eye mark. Be sure not to induce any twist into the eye portion. Use electrical tape to hold the form of the eye. Position the rope with the loop closest to you in the bitter end farthest away. Count down 6 picks from the point where the tapered sleeve enters the core, on the pick row that goes from top left to bottom right. Mark with a black marker. Mark the following 5 picks to the right in the same pick row. Line up the leg you just marked with a loop and mark the adjacent strands with 6 black marks as shown. On the top leg, mark with a contrasting marker the picks which are just adjacent to the 6 black marks of the opposite twist. On the middle rope, using the contrasting marker, mark the 6 picks aligned with the 6 black marks of the opposite twist. This will end up looking like 6 arrows pointing to the right and 6 arrows pointing to the left on the loop. All the contrasting marks should be on the inside. Starting with the rightmost black mark on the upper rope, pull out the strand. Tape the 2 small ends together and mark with a black marker. Tuck the strand, following the black mark on the middle portion, under 2 strands of the opposite twist. This strand will always follow the same strand on the middle portion. Still working right to left, tuck the next 2 black marked strands in the same fashion. After tucking the first 3 black marked strands, flip the whole unit over to begin tucking the contrasting strands. When flipped, the loop will be farthest from you and the bitter end closest. The contrasting strands will always get tucked upward and always pass under 2 strands of the opposite twist. Like the black strands, the contrasting strands always follow the same strand. Now working right to left, tuck all the contrasting ends into the loop portion. Each should pass under 2 strands of the opposite twist, following the contrasting mark they line up with. Flipped over into its original position, exposes the 3 black marked strands that have not been tucked. Tuck them now. After the initial 12 tucks, always tuck from left to right and always tuck white up and black down. Turn 90 degrees up. Once you have finished a 3rd set of tucks, the strands will line up. The order will be white, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, and black. This is referred to as coming up odd. Working from left to right, tuck all the contrasting strands upward. Continue tucking the alternating strands between black and white until your strands come in line again. We added the dollar to help you see when we flip the lines over. This time the order will be black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, referred to as coming up even. Continue tucking, alternating a row of 6 strands at a time, right and left, until you come up even again. Continue tucking, alternating between white and black until you come up even a 2nd time. Milk the splice portion, evening out any loose loops you may have left. Starting with the black row, take the 2 ends you taped together earlier and continue tucking with one of the 2, which is half the original strand. Perform the same process with the contrasting row. When these half strands come in line, they will be even with the black marked ends. Make sure all the ends are tight and that there are no loops. Milk the spliced portion, smoothing it out. Cut all the ends, leaving approximately a half-inch tail on each one. Remove the tape you used to form the eye. Remove the needle trapping the loop. Remove the needle that is trapping the sleeve slack away from the eye. Tie the line to a sturdy post right where the initial fid was used, which will prevent disrupting the line away from the spliced area. Hold the loop with one hand and use the other hand to pull the slack away from the tied off point and toward the loop. Once your hand can no longer fit in the loop, hold the core in the eye as shown. Now it gets tougher. You can use a large fid to soften the splice portion and to help bury the splice. Expect it to be tight. Continue pulling the slack over the spliced portion until it disappears. Finish with a whip lock which seizes the cover in place. Properly performed, this splice will yield 100% of the rope's rated break strength.